don't hire that copywriter until they answer this question. And that question is, are conditions favorable for us to see results? It's Paige here from the Impact Copywriter, and I'm a conversion copywriter that helps founders and marketers run higher converting marketing campaigns by focusing specifically on the marketing messages they use to reach and convert their ideal buyers. We also call it the copy. Part of the conversation, the early conversation that I have with potential clients is around the effectiveness of the work that we'll do together. Because the answer that I'm really wanting to get to is, are conditions favorable given what this client has, where their marketing is, all the different pieces that they have in place already? Are their conditions favorable for our work or the work I do to produce results in their business? Because the reality is, copywriting, messaging, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. So it's embedded in part of a larger system that is influenced depending on what type of copy that you're going to be working on and the type of project that you're coming to the copywriter for. It's going to be influenced by other factors that the copywriter may not control. It's best to illustrate this just by giving you some examples. So from my own experiences, when a client comes to me and they want to work on a sales page, we have to have a conversation about the earlier part of the funnel, right? Because a sales page is a bottom of the funnel asset, which means that whatever happens earlier in the funnel is going to influence the performance of that sales page. And so if we're talking about a sales page, I'm going to want to know, what does the rest of the funnel look like? How do you plan to promote this product? In a lot of cases, I like to talk about traffic, because traffic is not something that I solve for, at least not during the recording of this video. And so if I talk to a client and they don't have a traffic source, either paid or organic or a mix, they don't have traffic coming from anywhere, then I like to highlight that as a big risk to the project. Because even if I'm working on, let's say, a nurturing sequence, a sales sequence, and a sales page, which is a huge part of any funnel or launch, beyond writing copy for ads, but I don't actually set up the ad strategy, manage the ads, set up the audiences if we're talking about Facebook ads, for example. And so I don't do any of that. I don't offer that as a service. That's a specialty in and of itself. But the traffic sources heavily influence whether or not the copy that comes after it is going to perform. Can you reach your ideal buyers on paid media platforms? Because if you can't, it doesn't matter how great the messaging is later in the funnel, no one's ever going to get there for it to do anything for you. So when I talk to clients, a lot of times I like to ask questions around, well, do we have product market fit? So if you're an earlier stage business or a startup business and you have some early test sales, then we can kind of reasonably say, well, we at least have some degree of product market fit because some people are purchasing from us. Now, if you're breaking into a brand new customer segment, that kind of goes out the window a little bit. You can judge based on, well, are there competing products also serving this market? And then that can help us say, well, there is potential for product market fit because there are competing products. One thing I do want to highlight, though, is that a big component of product market fit is your pricing structure and your pricing model. And if you have product market fit, but then you completely change your pricing model, it can affect the response that your market has to that product. I've actually seen it happen in real life to where a client completely changed the pricing model after they had test sales. And when we launched our campaign with the new pricing model, the audience, the market reacted in a very negative way to that pricing model. And we had a lot of performance problems, but it was due to the fact that there was no longer such a strong product market fit between the audience or the market and the product. And that was due in a large part to the pricing model change. So just keep that in mind. I like to ask questions around, well, what's your promotion strategy look like? And that's where I'm trying to suss out how you plan to drive traffic, or do you have traffic sources that we're going to be tapping into? And so, for example, if someone has an email list, I want to know, well, what's the size of that email list? But then we want to ask some more important questions. What's your average open rate? Because you could have 50,000 email subscribers, but if only 10% of those open your emails, that's really the number of leads that you're looking at. You don't have 50,000 leads, you have less than that. You only have 10% are actual leads. So we can continue a little bit more about email list growth. How many subscribers join your list every month? What's the average growth rate of that list? So for example, if someone told me they had a 50,000 subscriber list, and then I ask more questions around their average growth rate, and they say, well, actually, we bought that list, and so we haven't had any new subscribers in the last 6 months. That tells me that there's a big problem. This list is likely to be stale, and we would want to invest in figuring out how we can warm up the list and figure out who's actually still a lead. So it's not enough just to ask, do you have an email list? We also have to ask about the growth, how active they are, how engaged they are. Are they opening your emails? How often do you message them? And things of that nature. Now, in terms of paid media, I like to ask questions around, well, how are you going to drive traffic if you're not relying on organic or you're planning to use paid media? Where is that going to come from? Do you have experience running ad campaigns on this platform to this audience? Have you seen results from those campaigns? And if you're not doing it in-house and you're hiring a contractor, then I want to know, well, how have you worked with this contractor before? Have they gotten results for you? Is this a brand new relationship? So I have worked with clients who worked with contractors, new contractors on the paid media side, and the contractors weren't able to run campaigns that sent traffic to the assets that we had worked on. So that's until we get qualified traffic to the sales page, we can't really measure performance. Another question could be around capacity. How many new clients could you take? So if I'm working for a service provider, for example, I actually worked with one years ago that we had a really successful campaign, and it brought in, I think it was 131 new clients in 30 days. And 2 months after launching that campaign, the CEO reached out to me and said we had to shut it down because we generated so much work on the back end we can't fulfill. Like, we're over capacity and we need time to catch up and fulfill on all the work that we've generated so far. So you can see here, that's actually a great position to be in because it means that you're in a position to hire and expand your capacity. But it matters from a conversion standpoint or from a ROI standpoint of evaluating, what your investment looks like and how much you can actually make from it given the capacity that you have. And the more that you do have a set capacity, then the more that needs to factor into the question that we're trying to answer is, are conditions favorable to see results? Or we could even modify it to say, are conditions favorable to see enough results that we're happy with the ROI? And capacity limits can influence that in a major way. Okay, this is by far not an exhaustive list of everything I ask, and a lot of the questions that I do ask does depend on, what the business does. A service provider versus someone who sells an online course. It's a different context. It also depends on what marketing elements they have in place. If they have an email list, then we're going to ask a bunch of email list questions. If they're not planning to use organic and they're planning to use paid media, then we have a lot of advertising questions that I want to ask. And so, answering this question requires the person you're working with to understand the context in which their work is embedded. And that takes experience. What I want you to realize based on everything that I'm sharing today is that the person that you're interviewing or engaging with should be collecting the data they need to answer this question. This should be part of the conversation you're having because the results that we get from our work together, it's a win-win scenario. And so I'm collecting the data I need to figure out, do we have enough evidence to suggest that this will be a win-win scenario? And if we don't, or if there are things that risk the potential for results like the traffic scenario I mentioned, or problems in buying email lists and not actually doing your own list building, we want to highlight those risks. So these are the risks to the project. If this isn't fine-tuned, if this isn't locked down, if this isn't dialed in, then it's going to affect the work that I do, and you may not see the results that we want to see because of these other factors that are going to influence the work. So if the person that you are engaging with is not having this conversation with you, I encourage you to ask that question. Are the conditions favorable for us to see results from this work? And the answer that you get by asking this question will help you determine whether or not this is the person you should be working with. If you'd like to partner with a conversion copywriter who does have this conversation earlier on in the process and could be very honest and clear about whether or not you are set up to see results from the work that we do together based on other factors that influence that work and other factors that are part of your marketing program or your business strategy, then we should chat. You can start a project conversation with me over at theimpactcopywriter.com.